So we are really excited to have Josh and Leslie give their testimony tonight. I don't read very many of these testimonies, but theirs I did get to read before tonight. And I literally had to stop a couple times because to fight back the tears. And it's just a beautiful story of how much God is for our marriage. And so I can't wait for you guys to hear it for sure. Leslie actually serves our children at Reengage on Monday nights. So we're super thankful for her. And I know it worked out great that we're on Zoom. So we all have our own children tonight. But Leslie would be serving our kids on Monday night. So we're thankful she's on this side with us tonight. And Josh actually, I remember Josh when I got baptized at the old Southern Hills chicken farm. He actually got baptized right in front of me. And then I went, and he looked a little bit different than he does today. He was all banged up when he got baptized. I didn't recognize him until really I read his story to know. But so we're thankful for them, and for being able to be vulnerable is difficult, and especially on Zoom through a screen. So we just appreciate their willingness to share their story with us. So here we go.
We are Josh and Leslie Williamson. Some of you guys have, you saw a snippet of our story at the church a couple months ago during our sermon series, Fight for Your Family. So we're going to dive deeper into that tonight. When we signed up for this a couple months ago, we definitely didn't think we would be at home. We thought we'd be at the church and get to see you all, but it didn't happen that way. But we're glad for everyone that's able to join us tonight. I hope that sharing our story can give some hope and light to others this evening. So I grew up in a small town outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm the middle child, and I've got two sisters. I grew up in a Christian household with what everybody saw as this picture-perfect family. My parents were very loving and caring, and we had all of our needs and our wants met. My parents did a really good job of sheltering us, which I really think backfired in the end, because I know for me, I saw life as just roses and rainbows, and I really didn't learn how to deal with problems or conflict as a child. We were really involved with our church. I went to Sunday school and youth groups and sang in the children's choir and mission trips. You name it, I did it. I was baptized as a child, and I made the decision to accept Christ into my life around the age of 11 or 12. I only kind of knew what that meant at the time. I knew it was something that I had to do, basically, to be saved and go to heaven. When I was 15, my family ended up moving to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I was devastated. I was just about to go into high school when I was leaving the only place that I knew. And within the first year of moving, my parents ended up getting divorced. Now, mind you, my parents sheltered my sisters and I so much that we absolutely had no idea that they were even having any problems. We legit thought that they never fought, because if they did, it was behind closed doors and we never knew it happened. So side note, in my mind, a perfect marriage, like the one that my parents had, is where nobody ever fought. You know, how crazy is that? So I'm not upset that my parents had their arguments, but I also didn't learn how to deal with issues in a healthy manner. So from as early as middle school, I can remember dealing with self-esteem issues. I had a lot of friends, and I grew up involved in every extracurricular activity and sports that I could, but I never felt like I fit in. After my parents got divorced, I battled depression and eating disorder. Those diminished and then exploded into alcoholism after high school. From the age of 18 to 20, I chose to let alcohol and men rule my life. And at this point, my faith was pushed aside, and I put God on the back burner because I knew that God didn't approve of my lifestyle.
I'm Josh. My dad's a railroader, so I grew up for the most part all across the South. I was born in Meridian, Mississippi. I spent my childhood in Tuscaloosa and Coleman, Alabama, and we finally settled down here in the Douglasville area, West Georgia. My dad was a single dad to me and my sister. A railroader's lifestyle is very busy, especially when you have two kids to raise. It seemed like every time I'd get settled in and make friends, we'd move again. I guess I subconsciously put up a wall because it became very difficult to get close to me emotionally. This coupled with the absence of my mother, which, you know, this would cause serious difficulties in my relationships down the road. My dad was and still is an incredible father. He's never really opened up to me about his faith. However, I know there was a dramatic event that happened when he was a kid that he's never talked to me about. It had a serious effect on his willingness to attend church regularly, and I never ever asked any questions, but needless to say, we weren't actively involved in church when I was younger. My dad was an incredible athlete. He was drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates baseball organization and saw to it that I would follow in his footsteps. So I was always involved in sports. When high school came around, I was an athletic standout in a number of different sports. During my junior year, I started drawing some attention from college scouts. This will bring great joy to most kids, but in my case, I just wanted my dad to come watch me play. The railroad would always find other plans for him, so he couldn't make it. At that time, I grew very resentful towards him because, obviously the reality of him being a single father with 2 kids to raise didn't cross my mind. All I wanted to do was play ball for Dad. So I started, I discovered alcohol and started partying a lot. And I was still a great athlete, but my desire to play the game would fade. Senior year came and I approached my coach, told him I wasn't going to play ball anymore. He begged me, but I wasn't having it. I found myself depressed without sports, but I was drinking and partying, all the time. My senior year was coming to a close, and I had to start thinking about what I was going to do next. After much thought, I decided I would enlist in the military, which is a period of my life that I'm not willing to talk about at this time. When I got out of the military, I relied heavily on alcohol to get me through my days. I was arrested a number of times, mostly alcohol related, and I lived like this for years, somehow managing to hold down a decent job. And my mom left me and my sister when I was 2 years old. In 2013, I decided to, let my guard down and meet her. And I hoped that this would mend some of my issues. But, we created a strong bond very quickly and found genuine love within a year of rekindling that love that was lost between us for all of my life. She was killed. She was killed in an accident. That anger of that situation, still obviously affects me today. But I found it in my heart to forgive my mom for not being there for me and my sister. In 2015, I decided I would follow in my father's footsteps and chase a railroad career. I have an absolutely incredible dad. He sacrificed more than I can ever imagine in order to take care of his family. And I'm truly blessed to have the opportunity to be half the man that he is. His wife, Patricia, has become more than a mom to me, and I absolutely love her. And I was incredibly blessed to have these people in my life, but I was too blind to see it. And then I met Leslie.
So Josh and I were married on September 6th of 2017. Not too far. So we met on the dating app Tinder. That really happened. I had been single for about a year, and I was just casually dating online at the time. At this time, I'd already been divorced twice. My first marriage was very toxic, full of verbal abuse and anger on his part and infidelity on my part. My second marriage was very short and full of abuse, manipulation, and complete chaos and destruction. Neither marriage centered around God because neither of them were Christians. And I was trying not to jump into another relationship that would end in failure yet again.
Yeah, at the time Leslie and I met online, I'd been single for a while and I wasn't doing much dating. The railroad kept me busy, and I didn't have much time for a dating scene. I was also a pretty heavy drinker, which took priority over searching for a girlfriend. But for some reason, when Leslie messaged me online, I decided I wanted to meet her.
So we went on our first date to a Mexican restaurant, and we hit it off from the start. Josh was very charming and funny. And of course, I found him very handsome. And he didn't have this beard then. And he's the only redhead that I've actually ever considered dating.
Winning. Leslie was attractive, confident. She had a great personality. The first week of us meeting, we went on 5 dates, I think it was, and we were very interested in each other. Our relationship obviously progressed pretty quickly. Within 2 months of dating, Leslie got pregnant with our daughter Harper. And, within 4 months, we bought a house, and within 5 months, we were getting married. We talked about marriage and having kids, but I don't think, obviously neither one of us expected it to happen so quickly.
Yeah, so much for taking it slow. I know for me that I definitely wanted to be married before Harper was born. I absolutely loved and wanted to marry Josh, but it was important to be married before Harper arrived. We got engaged for just a short period of time, and we went to the courthouse just by ourselves to make it official. I think both of us would agree that very quickly we realized our marriage was going to be a rocky road. When I met Josh, I had been really growing in my relationship with God. Although I grew up in the church, I had been a skydiving instructor since I was 21, so I hadn't attended church regularly as an adult. I did attend Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, however, because I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I got sober back in 2005. In 2014, I began a new transformation in my walk with God. I had recovered from my alcohol addiction, but I was still using men and sex to validate me as a woman. So feeling very guilty and ashamed of that sinful behavior, I made the decision to stop and become the trustworthy and loyal woman God created me to be. My faith was growing as I began a women's Bible study, and I began to do online church services. And this really was the first time as an adult that I felt like I was on the right path with God. And after I found out I was pregnant in 2017, I started searching for a church because I wanted Harper to grow up in one. And after trying out a few churches, I found myself at Southern Hills, and I knew that it was a perfect fit.
Well, when I met Leslie, I didn't have a relationship with God. Had a lot to do with my upbringing. But with all the evil that I'd seen and experienced, it wasn't really possible for me to believe that there was a God. Our marriage didn't take long to regress with my drinking. And Leslie would ask me to come to church with her, week after week, but I'd never go.
Being in recovery myself, I figured out very quickly that Josh had a drinking problem as well. I tried to help by inviting him to AA with me, but it took him a long time to ever realize that he had a drinking problem. At this point in our marriage, we were already struggling and arguing and didn't see eye to eye on anything. I was afraid that our marriage wouldn't last, and our daughter wasn't even born yet. The thought of being a single mom scared me to death, and that was not how I saw my life going at all.
I constantly relied on, I was constantly angry and relied on alcohol to numb my feelings. I felt very trapped and judged in our marriage, and I would stay away to alleviate the pressure of being a father and a husband. On March 6, 2018, I was involved in a motorcycle accident. The saddest part about my accident is that every person in my life assumed I was drunk when it happened. Ironically, I was not intoxicated, and it infuriated me that I had to prove it. Not to mention some of Leslie's family wanted her to leave me and move to Florida while I was in the hospital. I was the only person physically injured in this accident. It was disturbing for me to see devout Christians trying to persuade my wife to leave me because I was involved in the accident, which further pushed me from Christianity.
So after the accident, I was ready to walk away. I was so angry at Josh. Our marriage was failing. I was furious with his drinking. I was mad that he wasn't stepping up as a father. I was just done. One thing that I do know is that there are a couple of key people that God used at the exact right time to help save our marriage. I had a long talk with my dad as he came with me to pick Josh up from the hospital, and he told me to give him another chance. My father never gave up on me when I was trying to get sober, and he was telling me to give Josh another chance to prove that he could be the man God created him to be.
Yeah, I came home from the hospital. I was pretty banged up. I had a head injury and a broken collarbone. Results of a poor decision on my part. Leslie gave me the ultimatum of sobering up or losing my wife and child. I felt betrayed, and my old friend anger showed back up. But this time I didn't want to drink about it. I found that I was angry at alcohol. and didn't want any part of it. You know, unbeknownst to me, at the time, this was a blessing from God. I made the decision to keep my family. And 5 days after my accident, Shannon baptized me. Even though I was baptized, I didn't know what it meant to be a Christian. For the first couple of months after the accident, I felt like our marriage was getting back on track and better than before. But I wasn't building a relationship with the Lord. My unresolved issues from the past and issues I could no longer drink about were fueling my anger. And our marriage became strained again.
All during this time, I focused on what was wrong with Josh. And although he was sober, I knew that if he didn't deal with the deep issues in his life, that one, he wasn't going to stay sober, and two, I wasn't sure if our marriage would last. I would pray for God and I'd pray for Josh and ask God to bring about some change. But I never really focused on my sins as well. I was selfish and bitter. I was not sure how to be a Christian and follow God and treat my husband in a godly manner when I was so frustrated all the time. In the back of my mind, I would continually say to myself, I don't deserve this. I deserve to be treated better. One thing that I would learn later on in a verse that has stuck with me is Colossians 3:13. Make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others.
Several times within a year and a half of marriage, we were on the verge of divorce. Right after celebrating a year married was one of those times. So we decided to try marriage counseling as basically a last resort. We went for about 2 months worth of sessions, but did not seem to be getting anywhere with it. At the end of 2018, we had our biggest blow up, which led to a lot of anger and hatred and bitterness and jealousy between the both of us. For the next month, I believe both of us were living in life walking on eggshells, and we were both pretty miserable. I was angry and said so many hurtful things to Leslie that I'll never be able to take back.
Our marriage was so broken, and I just knew that it was coming to an end. I knew in my mind that a divorce was inevitable and that I was going to be a single mom. I had accepted it. 2 days after Harper's first birthday, Josh told me he was done and that he was leaving, and I told him to go and don't come back. I was done. I was ready to file for divorce, and I was ready to move on with my life. I really struggled getting to this point because I had been divorced twice. I struggled in the back of my mind knowing that God doesn't condone divorce, but also, how was God expecting me to continue living in a failing marriage? Didn't God want me to be happy? I didn't deserve to go through a lifetime of misery. For a year and a half, I prayed and begged God to change things in our marriage, and yet here we were again, ready for divorce. I questioned God a lot about where he was and what did he want from me, but a lot of times I felt like there was no answer back. Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. I really struggled to believe this at the time. The day Josh left, I had to take Harper for her 1-year doctor appointment. And after the appointment, something told me that I needed to go by the church. And I wasn't sure why at the time. But when I got there, I asked to speak to Shannon, and they said he was busy. And I asked to speak to Keith, and he was busy. And I'm pretty sure I asked to speak to Natasha, and I don't even know if she was there that day. But the only pastor available was Corey. And poor Corey, that's all I can say. I had been volunteering with the 456 about 6 months at the time. So he just kind of knew me. And he didn't know Josh at all. But he was about to hear it all. So I sat down with him for about an hour, and I just cried and talked to him. And I later realized that the reason that I went by the church was to get a pastor to tell me that it was okay to get a divorce. And never once did Corey tell me that divorce was the answer. He suggested that we separate for the time being and get involved with soul care. I flat out told Corey that Josh would never agree to it. But when I left the church, I decided I would try the separation, in the back of my mind knowing that Josh would never do it and I'd be filing for divorce anyways. But even knowing and believing what I did, I remember that night just falling on my knees and crying out to God to show me what his will was.
When you're angry, you can say some really harsh and ignorant things without really thinking about what you're saying. So I couldn't take back, I'm leaving you. And so all I wanted to do was come home. But when Leslie, obviously she told me she wanted a separation after speaking with Corey, and I was pretty furious about that. I took some time to really think about the direction my life was going, and I decided I wanted to just become a better human, even if it meant losing my family. I spent my entire life fixing my own problems, but I didn't even know where to begin with this. I was hesitant to reach out to Shannon because I knew that Leslie had already been to the church, and I didn't want to feel judged. I did get to meet with Shannon, and I was taken aback at how passionate and full of life he was. I thought, if God is doing this for Shannon, is it possible he could do it for me? It sparked something in me, so I signed up for soul care. I was meeting with a family friend named Martha to talk about the Bible, and she was teaching me about God until a spot opened up in soul care. I had no clue who God was. I didn't know where to begin, and I didn't know what being a Christian husband and father actually looked like. I was finally able to begin soul care with Corey, and life's never been the same. Little by little, I learned more about God. I was reading scripture and really getting into it. I started attending church as often as I could, and I could feel the change.
When Josh told me that he had reached out to Shannon and signed up for soul care, I was very shocked. At first, I thought he was just putting on a front to come home, but I very quickly saw some major changes in him. I honestly can't explain this new man that I was seeing, and even now, the only way that I describe it was God. God came into Josh's life and transformed him, and I felt like I was married to a different man in such a wonderful way. God showed up, and I doubted God, but he did show up, and he moved some major mountains. We decided to stay separated for about a month before Josh moved back, and our marriage has never been the same since.
Yeah, during the next several months, Leslie and I began, we continued to go to soul care, both of us, to work on ourselves as individuals. One of the biggest things we learned is how to communicate. I was always angry and lashed out, and she would always, get real quiet and go silent whenever she was upset. But through soul care, we learned how to communicate and why it is so important. We also learned how to deal with our sins from God's point of view, about making allowances for others' mistakes, and how to forgive even when you don't think you can. We were growing in our faith as individuals and began growing closer in our marriage as God became the center of it for the first time.
God was really changing us from the inside out. We had both had things we needed to work on. We still do. But today we give each other grace. Today, when things get tough, and they do, I don't automatically go to saying divorce is the answer. Today, God is the answer. When things began to get better in our marriage after we started soul care, I was reminded that things weren't always going to be great. There were going to be setbacks. And yes, in the past year, we have had our ups and downs, times that we have both struggled. But as a couple, we fought each battle with God on our side instead of fighting the battle against each other. We had to realize we're on the same team, fighting the battles against Satan, not ourselves. I even think that Josh and I have learned to call each other out when we aren't putting our focus where it needs to be, and that is on God. I'm able to tell Josh when I feel that he's not leading our family as God intended him to. And Josh is able to tell me when my attitude and behavior is less than God honoring. A year or two ago, there's no chance that either of us could have communicated that to one another without someone getting defensive or blowing up. Today, we are both able to step back and say, God, help me to die to self so that you can live.
I want to encourage, each and every one of you to prioritize your faith, truly die to self, and then let Christ live through you. God knows your every want and need. Trust in him to guide you. His answers are not always immediate, trust me, but he is listening.
I would say my encouragement is that God is there. To echo what Josh said, God is listening. God has not abandoned you during this time. And the biggest thing of it is that God can move mountains, and our marriage proves that. I have been through many obstacles in my life, and God has brought me through them all. But I absolutely did not give God enough credit for all he can do. He completely changed and formed Josh into a godly man that I admire and love, and he blessed our marriage far beyond anything that I could have ever imagined. 1 Corinthians 13:4-8. Love is patient, love is kind, does not envy, does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It also protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. We are learning to live this out day by day.
We want to thank you guys for listening to our testimony this evening. The way that God has used our stories in the past has been so incredible and all for His glory. God has shown me how important it is to be vulnerable and share openly about life, no matter how much I don't like doing that, the good and the bad. John chapter 3 verses 20 and 21 says, "All who do evil hate the light and refuse to go near it for fear their sins will be exposed. But those who do what is right come to the light so others can see that they are doing what God wants." And one day your story can be used to help others. Thank you all for tuning in to hear ours.
Thanks, guys.
Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Josh and Leslie. Man, what an incredible story of God's goodness, right, to you guys. What an incredible story of I love what you guys ended with there. 1 Corinthians 13, and it says love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. I see that in you guys. Josh, I remember when you got out of the baptismal, and I didn't know I had a towel there, and I didn't know how to get you out without hurting you. He's in a sling, right? And but what a sweet moment, man. And not just that moment. I think the reason it's imprinted in my brain is because of where you guys are now. Because there was a lot of other folks that got baptized that day. Honestly, until Brooke mentioned it, sorry, Brooke, I'd forgotten that she was one of them. I love you. Awesome that you were there. But I think that's just a testament to the journey that God has taken you guys on, And so I hope for everybody tonight in hearing this, that you see the goodness that's there. Josh, I love what you said. How did you say it? I want to encourage you to prioritize your faith. When we seek God, He is so good to us. When we make Him the priority, He is so good to us. Even in what we feel like could be the worst of times. And what an incredible story you guys have about that, seeking Him and what He's done. So again, thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you for sharing. We greatly appreciate it.